pediatrics altogether, not just congenital heart defects. We do have a new pediatric medical officer at CDRH. The spot was vacant for a while, but Dr. Vasoom Paris is now heading the effort at CDRH for pediatric devices, and he has provided me a huge list of initiatives that I can go over that him and the center are trying to do to advance pediatric device development. As stated previously, our office's mission is to really promote the development of products, including drugs, devices, biologics, and medical foods for the treatment, diagnosis, and prevention of rare diseases and conditions. So as you can see on this slide, our office kind of has a designation program and a grants program. And I know a lot of people always hear about NIH grants, but FDA actually has some grants as well. It's a smaller pot of money, but we do have this program in our office. And so I'll go through all of these programs in a little bit more detail. So as you are aware, the challenges for rare diseases is that there are over 7,000 known rare diseases in the world, but really only a small portion of them have approved treatments. And so from this, we have, because of this issue, we have actually given more than 500 orphan drug approvals. And there have been about 69 humanitarian device approvals as of last month. So this Venn diagram I really like because it kind of shows how pediatrics and rare diseases kind of come together. And as you can see in the middle, those that are familiar with the Berlin heart, it's really where pediatrics and rare diseases, this device was specifically designed and created for that particular problem. So you can see on the left, these devices were created for pediatric diseases, and the ones on the right, were more for rare diseases. But really, I think our program that I'm going to discuss, the HDE and HUD program, really talks to devices like the Berlin heart that are made specifically for what can be seen in the middle of this Venn diagram. So the first program I'm going to talk about that our office manages is the Orphan Drug Designation Program. So the Orphan Drug Act in 1983 was created to motivate industry to develop drugs and biologics for rare diseases by promoting financial incentives. And so this is really important to understand because there's a distinction between drug designation and device designation. And we do hear a lot about, as Dr. Jenkins said, that a lot of times, look at the user fee is almost a little over $2 million for an application. And so if you do get orphan drug designation, there are things as tax credits for 50% of clinical trial costs, a waiver of the marketing application fee, and eligibility for 7 years marketing exclusivity. So what that means is that if you are the first drug approved for that product, you get 7 years of exclusivity to sell your product that no one else can enter the market, so it's a huge financial incentive for industry. And then if there is a product on the market that already exists and your drug shows that you have clinical benefit, you can also get the exclusivity for that as well. So the Orphan Drug Acts define rare diseases for drugs and biologics as diseases or conditions that affects less than 200,000 people in the U.S. Or a drug that won't be profitable. The next program I'd like to talk about is the Rare Pediatric Disease Designation Program. So this was created in 2012 by the FDA's law, and this is to really encourage development of drugs and biologics for rare pediatric diseases. So the basic idea is if a company or sponsor receives approval for a rare pediatric disease application for a rare pediatric disease, the sponsor is then eligible to receive a priority review voucher, which can be redeemed or transferred to another sponsor to obtain priority review of another application that would otherwise be ineligible for a priority. So what happens is if a company gets approval for this rare pediatric disease, they get this priority review voucher, and the company can either keep the voucher and use it to submit an application that, for a non-rare disease, so all that incentive that you saw earlier with the $2 million, or they can choose to sell the priority review voucher. So some people that may be interested in this program, there have been cases recently where this priority review voucher has been sold, and it has been for a lot of money. So this is a really good incentive for companies to develop these drugs. So now I'm going to touch a little bit on the HUD and HDE program, but I'm going to go a little bit more into detail about it after I discuss all the programs. So a humanitarian use device is a medical device that's intended to benefit patients in the treatment or diagnosis of a disease or condition that affects or is manifested in fewer than 4,000 individuals in the United States per year. So that's an incidence rate. So the device can only be used in that many patients in a full year. The humanitarian device exemption is actually the pre-market submission that allows a HUD device to be marketed once they demonstrate safety and probable benefit that satisfies the FDA. So our office works with the humanitarian use device designation, and then once they get that designation, they can submit the HDE to the review divisions. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of our grants programs. So we have an Orphan Products Grant program. So what this program does is it encourages clinical development of products for use in rare disease or conditions. So these are clinical trials. We fund clinical trials for the development. And this can be through industry or for academic research. We've seen a very broad range of applications. And this is for drugs, biologics, medical devices, or medical foods. We see mostly drugs, but we have seen some medical devices, so we'd like to see more, so I encourage people to come to us about this program. So we usually fund about 3 to 4 years of funding. Right now there's about 60 to 85 ongoing grant funded projects, and we fund about 10 to 15 new grants per fiscal year. I'm a project officer on these grants as well, so we go on site visits once during the clinical trial, and it's a really great program. Another grant program is the Pediatric Device Consortium, which maybe some people in this room have heard about. The goal of this consortium is to support the development of nonprofit consortia designed to stimulate projects for pediatric devices. So there are 8 consortia throughout the United States, and what we do is we grant funding to the consortia, and then the consortia kind of decides which projects they fund. So it's really an interesting program. The consortia can provide a huge range of just advice to actual funding. But this includes intellectual property, legal advice, business planning, funding advice, regulatory consulting, preclinical and clinical study planning, so all the engineering testing that needs to be done, as well as the right study design, particularly based on the pathway to market for your device, and prototyping and design services. So this is a really great program. Like I said, right now we have 8 funded consortia within the United States, and we gave about $3.3 million in 2004, and we spent about $15 million to date to help the device development for pediatrics. So we provided advice on development of over 500 medical devices since 2009. Our newest grant program that just came out this year is the Natural History Studies grant. So as you can imagine, a lot of times we don't really understand where these diseases come from. So the ultimate goal here is to really support marketing approvals to help characterize the natural history of a rare disease or condition, identify genotyping and phenotypic subpopulations, and develop or validate clinical outcome measures, biomarkers biomarkers and diagnostics. So I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail about the humanitarian use device program. So in 1990, Congress established the HUD HD marketing pathway. So it really hasn't been nearly as long as drugs has. So this program or pathway was really designed to encourage the development of devices intended for rare diseases. And in 2007, even more recently, there was an incentive developed for HUDs for pediatrics by removing a profit restriction. So there used to be a profit restriction saying basically if you got approval of an HDE device, you couldn't make any money off of it. So that was lifted in 2007 specifically for pediatric devices. But they have to be labeled for the pediatric use, which is an issue too because sometimes they're not labeled for it. And then these devices are reviewed annually by the Pediatrics Advisory Committee, which is in the Office of Pediatric Therapeutics. So the general requirement for a new device to enter the market with the PMA application, which is a pre-market approval application, is that you have to do the trial to show that the device is safe and effective. And so what I'm trying to drive home here is that for this pathway, when the FDA review division reviews the application, they only need to show safety and probable benefits. So it is a lower bar. They don't need to have the effect. They're exempt from the effectiveness requirement. So this is really a two-step process that I'm trying to explain. So the HUD designation request is submitted to my office, which is the Office of Orphan Products Development. So that's the first step that a company needs to take. The second step is after the HUD designation is granted, only then can an HDE application be submitted to the review divisions, either in the Center for Devices and Radiological Health or the Center for Biologics. We actually do have one biologic HDE device that has been approved. So the application, as I said, is submitted and reviewed by the Office of Orphan Products Development. I am one of the reviewers, and so a lot of my work involves, the review of the disease or condition based on device functionality. So all this, information about how the device works and really what the device is treating is what we're asking the question. And then really from that, once we decide, hey, this is the disease this device can treat, what's the target population that may benefit from the device? And so really the clearance for this type of designation isn't an approval. We're not looking at safety and probable benefit here. We're really looking at if the population estimate is less than 4,000 patients per year in the United States. And that's when we'll grant an approval decision of the designation request. Specifically for pediatrics, for the purposes of HUD designations, the pediatric population is actually defined as those younger than 22 years of age. I know it's different, that's similar to CDRH as well, and I know it's different in the drug world, and I know FDA is not consistent, but that's what it is for pediatric devices. And again, as I said, the device may be eligible if the pediatric population is affected by the disease or condition is less than 4,000. So we will designate a device solely on pediatrics if it qualifies under the population estimate. So we won't include all the adult patients if the device is specifically designed for pediatrics. And now I'm going to talk about the HDE program. So as I said before, the HDE is the marketing application, and that's reviewed by the review divisions in either CDRH or CBER. And so it really authorizes the marketing of a humanitarian use device. Some of the limitations, however, to the HD approval is that IRB approval is required before the device can be used, except in emergency situations. The labeling must clearly identify the device as a HUD, and so that's maybe in the labeling where we really talked about here that maybe the effectiveness criteria hasn't been demonstrated for this device. And that's really not to deter physicians from using the device, but saying, hey, this hasn't really, this has not been evaluated at the same bar as a PMA device. And as I said, there are profit restrictions, but for pediatrics, that has been lifted. So in order to be eligible for the program, you have to first have that first step, right, which is the HUD designation, and there also must be no comparable device currently on the U.S. market. So again, the approval threshold for an HDE is safety and probable benefit. And probable benefit is a very gray term. It really is, it's really specific to the experts that review the application, but the general idea is that it really outweighs the risk that the device will put on the patient. One of the things I already mentioned is that one of the HD post-approval requirements is that every year these devices must go in front of the PAC, which is the Pediatric Advisory Committee. So it's a periodic annual review of only those approved HDEs labeled for pediatric patients allowed to make profit. So this really ensures that the HDE remains appropriate for pediatric populations for which it is approved. It's coordinated by the Office of Pediatric Therapeutics, and it's basically a panel meeting, and so the information presented to the PAC includes medical device reporting since the approval and any other relevant safety information, a summary of post-approval studies if they were done. So after approval, a lot of times with these type of devices is that companies will commit to do a post-approval study so that we can collect data on how the device is used in a real-world setting. And a summary of relevant peer-reviewed literature published. So our epidemiologists do a fabulous job of looking at all of the literature that was published on the device in the last year. So the panel then really kind of decides, and there's the decision made at the end of the presentation of whether the panel believes that the device is still safe to be on the market. We recently performed an HDE analysis of all of the HDE approvals. And for the target population of HDEs, as you can see on this graph, there were, this is from 2007 to 2015. And so if you look at the number of HDE approvals for pediatric only, there looked to only be about like 3. But then if you look for not age specific, which is a lot of times the companies will just stay silent on that piece and won't actually label it specifically for pediatrics, we have about 13 that are not age specific. So it looks like about 11% of HD approvals are labeled for pediatric patients only. 22% are labeled for pediatrics and adults, but about 72% can be appropriately used in pediatric devices. So this, it can be a little misleading sometimes with actual label indication of what can actually be used on pediatrics. So our statistics as of last month for the HUD program, HDE program, is that there have been a total of 371 submitted designation requests to our office. We have designated 237 of them. There have been 69 approved HDEs, and as I said, one is a biologic device. And there are 13 devices that are approved under HDEs that are currently allowed to make profit. One of these superseded to a PMA, and one was transitioned to a 510K. So here's a list of all the HDEs that have been approved for congenital heart defects. So the Impella, as we've heard a lot about, the Berlin heart, the Medtronic Melody pulmonary valve, the Levitronics, Centromag right ventricular assist device system, and the Contegra pulmonary valve conduit. So these have all been approved using the HUD and HD pathway to market. So there's a URL on the bottom of this slide, and it's where you can see all the approvals of all the HD devices. But I just wanted to call out this one specifically for CHD. Here's some of the initiatives that CDRH is working on for pediatric medical device development. The first bullet I think is very exciting. We just came out with the guidance, and we're having a webinar, I think, in a couple of months. And this is for pediatric extrapolation. And So what this guidance really entails is that if a device has been studied with only adult patients, how can we extrapolate that data to show that it might be safe and effective, there might be safety and probable benefit for use in pediatrics. And either this could be doing no testing on the pediatric patients or having some and just kind of making heads or tails on how we can use that data. There's a pediatric, so then internally at FDA to kind of, because not every expert in their particular field has experience, and if a reviewer gets a product that has this extrapolation, there's a team set up now at CDRH where they're going to, the PEDS team, where they're going to kind of work on all of these submissions that we see. We're working on a pediatric professors and residents program, pediatric subspecialty champions program. We have the expedited access pre-market approval pathway for unmet medical needs. We have the medical device innovation consortium, the CDRH innovation pathway, and we have a providing information about pediatric uses of medical devices guidance as well. So in summary, the office that I work in, the Office of Orphan Products Development, manages multiple programs to incentivize the development of drugs, devices, and biologics for rare and pediatric diseases or conditions. The HUD and HDE program allows for devices intended for use in patients with rare diseases or conditions to have an alternative pathway to market, right? So they have to show safety, but they only have to show the probable benefit, not the efficacy bar. And HD approval is marketing approval. So don't get that wrong. The company is still able to market the device with some of the limitations that I talked about. Multiple HDs have been approved for congenital heart defects, and CDRH really has a lot of initiatives in place, and really has got, Dr. Bassoon has gotten the ball rolling on these initiatives to encourage pediatric device development. So I really thank you for letting me talk today. My email address and phone number if you ever want to reach out or have any questions about our program. So thank you.